Hello, everybody. Good morning. It's not very often that I get up this early and do a presentation, so thank you for being here. I just want to have a conversation today, and I'm talking about what can hospitality and what can chefs do, what are they doing to tell a bigger story around sustainability and the impact that particular plant-based options can have on the environment. So I just want to have a conversation about that. But let's just start. Where are we? Where is the market at the moment in terms of the way that chefs, in particular, think about plant-based? Where are we as a world, as a group of consumers on this planet that consume resources? Where we are is in a place where, to date, or in recent times, let's say, over the last 20, 50 years in particular, meat consumption has been ever increasing and on the rise. It's definitely not sustainable. And it's reached the point where most menus are entirely filled with proteins that are animal-based. All right? And you'll see throughout this discussion, I'm not saying eating meat is bad. I think that's a mistake, and I think that doesn't necessarily get us to where we need to go. Not a lot of people in the audience, but let me ask a question. Put your hand up if you're plant-based. Are you plant-based at the moment? Anyone in the audience? Great. Would you consider eating more plants if you had options? Great. All right. That's about 40%. Some of you still aren't convinced. Okay. So let's see. Who likes vegetables? Okay, that was better. That was much more. Okay. At least we have one person or two people there that completely don't like vegetables at all. All right. So back in the day, eating plant-based or having vegetable options on the menu was not unusual. In fact, we celebrated the garden. I grew up in Greece and Australia. My dad's Greek. In the old way of thinking, you couldn't eat meat every day of the week. You simply couldn't afford it. So the years that I spent in a village in Greece as a young boy, we would only have meat once a week because that's all we could afford. The rest of the time, we had to eat really interesting plant-based meals, right? They were coming from the garden. The same was true in many places. And really, it's the evolution of sort of wealth, a bigger middle class that have driven us to associate the eating of meat with wealth. And that's not necessarily true. Certainly not in the impact it has on the planet. So I guess in the 1950s in particular in the US, there was a huge push by the advertising industry to lobby not just Congress in the US. Same thing happened in other countries, happened in Australia, happened in the UK, happened in Europe, where they were lobbied to push meat. So the same way tobacco industry lobbied for pushing tobacco, the same guys, the same advertising companies that promoted tobacco also promoted the idea of how to get people to eat more meat. So so there's a fundamental shift around this time, coming out of the end of the Second World War. People had been thinking about a lot of changes. All of a sudden, this sort of ad became very common. Well, not very PC today, I guess, but there it is, right? Flashback. And it became associated with being manly. You were a man if you ate meat. If you didn't eat meat, you weren't a man. But performance sports definitely are proving otherwise at the moment. All right. I was one of those chefs. I don't know if you mean by one of those chefs. I'll tell you in a sec. So there I am. This is actually I think this might have been the first ever piece of media that I got. You can see how old I am. It was 1991. But, I was cooking back then already. All right. So back then, if the waiter came in with a docket and said, "Oh, we've got a vegetarian in the restaurant, chef," there was a lot of bad language. Maybe a plate was thrown, and I would curse those vegetarians or vegans that had come to ruin my day. How dare they think about, wanting to ask for something that wasn't on a menu and that wasn't meat. So I was one of those guys. I was pretty angry back then. I'm not alone. May he rest in peace, He was an amazing man. In fact, when I read his book, it was amazing. One of the best, I think, books ever written about what it really means to be in kitchen life. So, here's Anthony also, going on about how annoying vegetarians are. Julia Child, one of the originals, probably, if not the original celebrity chef out there, you know, she didn't even think vegetarian was healthy. So how far have we come in terms of associating the fact that Julia Child back in the day didn't even think that choosing to eat more plants was healthy? That's what a great job the advertising industry had done on our perception of meat. Our friend Gordon, I actually know Gordon. I've done TV shows with Gordon. He's actually a really nice guy, and he definitely puts it on for the camera, but this is absolutely true. He yells at people in his kitchen for being vegetarian, if the waiter comes in, I should say, and they ask for a vegetarian meal. He's a hard man, right? And I love this. My biggest nightmare would be if the kids ever said, "Dad, I'm a vegetarian," right? So that's how it is still largely in some places. That's how it was, but not all like that. You know, this is one of my favorite chefs in the world. I'm such a huge fan of Alain Passard. This guy, he really is truly a master chef. And he made a very bold move back in 2001. We had a 3-star Michelin in Paris. He's considered like the darling of French cuisine, one of the grand masters. And he decided that he'd had enough of killing animals or butchering them in his kitchen, that he was full, as he described it. There's actually there's a great episode of Chef's Table where you can see him talk about that. And his expression was, "I'm full of it." So he decided to completely make his restaurant plant-based. There was an uproar in Paris. Everyone said he was crazy. How could you take a 3-star Michelin restaurant and make it completely, well, vegetarian, I should say. It was largely vegetarian when he made that change. But not only did he change it to a vegetarian restaurant, he also didn't have recipes. He just took things from the garden, created and served, right? So really a great master. So, Tal Ronan, I like this quote from Tal, where he says, Crossroads won't be called a plant-based restaurant. It will just be called a restaurant. I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we still live in a world where it has to feel like it's not part of the menu, but that's changing. This is just some of the stuff that he's doing. Again, inspired plant-based. I mean, this looks delicious, so I hope everyone sees this and says it's delicious. So those who don't like vegetables, would you eat this? I hope you would. All right. Okay, Richard Ebus, another pal of mine. Richard's been a pioneer in pushing his restaurant in Hong Kong and the work that he does with Mandarin Oriental. In pushing forward and being sustainable. So, his approach was to think about how he would shift to being 50% plant-based, and how he would cut out dairy, and how he would use less meat in the dishes where he actually was putting meat. This is a really interesting, thoughtful way to approach the issue. And as I speak a bit more about it, in fact, I think this is actually the right approach right now. There's sort of this radicalization that happens with, extreme portion of plant-based eaters who feel that they are somehow holier than thou. And if you don't follow 100% this doctrine, then you are doing no good. So I think that's a huge mistake. And I think, chefs and plant-based companies and individuals that are driving an agenda to change and increase the amount of plant-based options on the menu are actually affecting more change than the hard, radical end of the market that is saying, if you don't do it our way, you're wrong. That simply alienates people, and I think that's not successful. And I'm going to show you in a minute a couple of examples why I think that. All right, so where are we now? Sort of from a global perspective, I mean, did everyone read this news? I guess you're all foodies. I assume you're foodies if you're here listening to me, maybe. I don't know. But here we have one of the greatest restaurants, 11 Madison Park in New York. Post-COVID, they come out of COVID, they're going plant-based. They're inspired to rethink the way that they are approaching food. It's a huge statement. Dominique Green, she has taken all her restaurants plant-based. Another bold move by a thought leader. So we have in Paris the first Michelin purely vegan restaurant. Again, these are small examples. These are not major shifts yet. But what it's saying is that the people at the top of the game, they're thinking about it. Epicurious, I guess you heard about Epicurious, They no longer put beef recipes on their platform, all right? Another big statement, and we will look in a little bit about the impact of beef itself. Again, I'm not saying beef's bad or don't eat beef, but it's just not sustainable to continue to eat the amount of beef we do at and the size of the servings and so on. So it's a pretty interesting move they made. And some people thought it was kind of silly, but I get you. I sort of say, I bet they checked the data before they made this call, because they're a business. And I bet they checked that there was as much people following other recipes and as interested in other recipes as they were in beef recipes. So they made a conscious decision that they were going to get out in front of it and actually make a statement. Okay, Compass. This is one of the largest catering companies in the world. So they recently released a press release saying that by 2030, they would be largely moving their menu, over 40% of the menu towards alternative proteins, right? Another big statement, and that is going to have a direct impact on schools, because they cater to a lot of schools, they cater to airlines, they cater to a lot of folks that actually get now more choices when it comes to plant-based. So that's kind of a mass market move, and we're moving from these early adopters now to larger players that are making a statement and looking towards the way that plant-based should be seen as a viable option in the marketplace. Okay, so what's going on in China? I want to talk a little bit about something that's very dear to me. I'll try and keep the plug low. In the interest of transparency, I am one of the founders. The founder sitting here, thank you, Frank's always a big supporter. I believe in this mission, and I became part of this because I believe in the movement as much as anything else. So I joined a movement when I became part of this. And for me, it's just the best example I can give you of the work that I'm personally doing, along with an incredible team, to affect some change in the market. And back to my earlier point, where I said, you can affect more change by being part of the market versus alienating yourself and trying to become really fixed in an idea that is not rigid. So I think, again, this is all using dishes that myself, Mark, who's sitting in the audience here as well, a very talented chef that I work with, and all the other chefs in the community that we work with are creating these incredibly tasty dishes where you simply don't miss the meat. I want to talk for a minute about the schools program that we've undertaken. So we're in about 30 schools. We've fed about 20,000 students so far, where we've been able to affect the menu in all of these schools and campuses, in major canteens for corporates, where now zero's on the menu at least once a week. That'll become 2 days a week, right? It'll become 3 days a week. So by subtly bringing this program into these environments, we're beginning to give kids the opportunity to start thinking about plant-based. And believe me, they think about it. So we've got these kids who are your future customers if you happen to be in the F&B business, who want plant-based choices, who are being educated now about the impact that not having plant-based options on your menu is going to have on the environment. So these are your future customers, right? And these are some of the programs that we're offering to the students. Nutritional lectures on plant-based food, students' cooking classes, student cooking competitions, sustainable projects, led by the students. And so I'll digress for a second. We have a non-profit platform as well called Own What You Eat, where we use to educate, to create a conversation. And one of the things we're very proud of is when we have these conversations, we want to have a vegan, a vegetarian, an absolute staunch meat eater, all sitting at the same debating table having a conversation. And you can imagine that gets heated, but we want that conversation, because by bringing these folks together, we start to really talk about how to affect change. And we have some of the most adamant meat eaters, let's say a year ago, chefs-wise, who laughed at us, who didn't want to talk to us, who now all have it on the menu. And actually, so this is 12 months. We've seen so much change. This has been part of that, but here again, we're affecting, how kids become part of the future. They care a lot about this, I can tell you. They're leading the entire program. Again, some of the events, I actually had a lot of fun talking at a food waste program where the kids all competed to reduce food waste. So there's a natural tie-in when the students think about sustainability. They're thinking about food waste, they're thinking about plant-based, they're thinking about the future. So these are your future customers, no matter what industry you're in. Okay, one-star Michelin restaurant in Shanghai. We got on there, we made it. This was, again, another breakthrough for us, took a lot of convincing. I want to talk about Youkuai for a minute as well. Here's a chef who has embraced plant-based, is one of the best restaurants in the country, Asia's 50 best, I should say, probably deserves to be on Asia's 50 best. It's truly phenomenal. I tried to meet him at least 3 times. He never meets with me. He says he's in the restaurant. I go to have dinner. I say, can I meet chef? He refuses to come out and meet anybody. But I love his work anyway, and I'm a huge fan. Okay. Creativity is the emphasis of flavor. Table number 0. So this is an initiative that I've been taking around the country, again with Chef Mark, where we collaborate and create very high-end dining experiences, where again, we're trying to feed folks who typically don't think about fine dining as something that is connected directly with plant-based. And we're really making an impact there. And it's been a phenomenal journey for me, working on this particular project and creating all these dishes. All right. We'll go on for a minute and talk a little bit about environmental impact of meat. I guess we can't have a talk like this and not go there. So let's go there for a sec. All right. So I like this statement. So if cows were a country, they would be the 3rd largest greenhouse gas emitter in the world. All right. Is really eating beef nonstop sustainable? As the population grows, is it going to become an issue at some point? What alternatives do we have? All right. So animal products use 20% of the world's fresh water. Beef uses 50 times more water than growing vegetables. The supply chain is completely broken. As we industrialize the agricultural world, we completely moved away from a balanced, process that makes sense, that can grow with us as our populations grow around the planet. So what's one of the greatest challenges man has going forward? Water. The people argue and talk about the fact that there probably will be water wars. The future oil wars will be water wars, right? And here we are wasting water. It's where we grow plants to feed them to animals, and then we kill the animal, and then we go back and eat the animal. Completely not sustainable, completely waste of resources. Now, again, not saying that we shouldn't eat beef. I'm saying maybe we want to eat, maybe 10% of the time eat beef. Eat 90% less beef, all right? Because that'll make a difference. Imagine how that's going to impact the planet. Okay, so livestock uses 80% of the world's agricultural land. So again, the system's broken. We grow plants to feed animals so we can eat the animals, while frankly, the part of the world is still hungry, or a large part of the world is still hungry. About 9 million people a year die of starvation just simply because they do not have enough food to eat. So I won't go too much about carbon emissions, but this is just a quick fact. If we just do everything right, we still grow by 2%. If we don't do anything, we grow by 4%. I mean, then those crops that we're growing, they are going to die. They're not going to be able to feed the cows or the other livestock that we grow, and then the water will become scarcer. Do the math. This is not like something that is difficult to figure out, right? But if we eat more plants, we can actually solve this problem. Okay, so again, I would say eating more plant-based, okay, is one of the best things you can do to lower carbon emissions as an individual. And you have that power in your hand when you go to the supermarket, when you go to your favorite restaurant, when you speak to chefs and ask them what is going on as far as their approach to plant-based. Okay, so meat production, again, just to go into a couple of interesting points here. So health-wise, half of the world's antibiotics are going into animals, and those antibiotics are going into us. So is anyone here someone who likes to consider themselves completely natural? Like they live a very holistic lifestyle, they do alternative medicine? I don't know, maybe there is someone in this room that does like to do that, maybe more than a few. Yet, antibiotics are in your meat, and you're not being given a choice not to have it, okay? I cut my finger last night. As a chef, you do that. And, I was going to go get a stitch. I still might. But I know the first thing they'll do is give me an antibiotic, right? And I'm going to say no to the antibiotic because I don't think I really need it. But if I have a steak, I'm going to have antibiotics anyway. So maybe let's have a steak tonight. I don't know. And that might be good for my finger. We'll see. Probably not. Anyway, strains on the environment. You can't see this number, but maybe you can, or it's me that needs glasses. So agriculture. So 77% of the land that's dedicated towards agriculture 77% of that is going towards meat production. Of the 100% of the world's usable land, 50% of it is going towards agriculture. So that's 50% of the world's agriculture, 70% of that being used for livestock. I want to come over and look at this number here as well for a second. There's an interesting stat here, right? This is the growth in meat consumption, all right? Interesting number here, this China. So it's a little old, a little out of date, but it's still the same pretty much today. So China's sort of starting to lead the world in meat consumption. Why? Because China all of a sudden became very wealthy, all right? There was a lot more, disposable income available. And one of the first statements that you want to make when you now have money is you want to put more meat on the table. And we also see a phenomenon which the government has reacted to, where people are over-ordering. So when you have money, you eat more meat. You also order more to show off how wealthy you are. Okay, so this vicious cycle is driving up meat consumption in China. So when you look at then you look at China's food safety. So you have this situation where everyone's eating more meat. China's having to import soybean, for example, and other grains in order to feed its cows or whatever, or pigs and so on, and then they're feeding them back to human. It's creating a deficit in the way that food safety works in China, and is exposing China to a huge risk on safety and how it will continue to feed its people going forward. So China's definitely looking at this. They're very aware of this, and they're addressing it, and China's probably the smartest country on the planet. So I firmly believe that, and I think they are going to solve this issue. And I think for anyone who's in the plant-based business, it's a pretty good thing. So I suspect what we'll see by 2035, that number's going way down. And because it is going to address food safety and security in China. Okay. So the modern plant-based menu. Rediscovering heritage cooking. I wanted to throw this in because this is something that I kind of started thinking more about. As I cooked more plant-based food, I started thinking more about old ways of cooking, old ways of fermentation. So got really into fermentation. And again, Mark, he was here tonight. Today, I should say, he's a bit of a fermentation expert. So we've had a lot of fun creating great sort of sauces, things to replace fish sauce using fermentation and vegetables. We've had so much fun thinking as chefs how to solve the issue of still creating those flavors, the umami, all the things that a chef wants by using these old techniques. So in many ways, going more plant-based as a chef has opened this door for rediscovery, because we're not cutting corners. We're thinking about every element that produces flavors. There's a lot of shortcuts and tricks that chefs can use to kind of get there other ways. But this has forced us to think the right way as chefs. I think it's been a hell of a lot of fun. Foraging. There's been a big resurgence in foraging. Again, the amazing flavors that come straight from nature. Noma, who's obviously been doing this for a while in Copenhagen, they kind of put it on the map in many ways. Again, they're going more plant-based, and they're foraging, for products to find those unique flavors. In fact, I'll go back to here. Noma has an incredible book if you're interested in fermentation, where actually they studied and researched fermentation just for the fact of creating new flavor profiles. Okay, again, repeating what I said, old recipes, natural fermentations. This is part of the journey that we can take as foodies as we discover more viable plant-based options. Okay, so what's next? Okay, so at the end of the day, as I said, the power is in the hands of the consumer. As long as chefs are being encouraged to offer more choice, as long as we're asking for more choice, we will end up in a place where the menus ultimately become more balanced. Should a menu be 50% plant-based and 50% meat? Is that unreasonable? In my way of thinking, I think it's a very reasonable point to make. And we should be challenging the chefs to do that. Make them think a little bit more. I'm a chef. Force us to think more. All right? We can do it. Just put the pressure on us to do it. Put the pressure on your supermarkets. And again, what will happen is chefs tend to be thought leaders in their industry, and that'll lead to more policy shift as more people are pushing the agenda, okay? And again, I'm not saying anyone should walk out of here and become plant-based. Don't have to do that. Just choose to kind of make a few more options on your personal menu. Okay. It is also good business, right? So this is where the plant-based industry is right now as a business. It pales in comparison to meat, like pales in comparison. But it's catching up. If you looked at this number 10 years ago or 5 years ago, it was a very different number. So it's growing. So it also makes good business sense to start thinking about where this industry is going. So flexitarian chefs, right? I think this is really cool. I think the idea of, this man here he is, the angry Gordon himself, all right? He recently made a bit of a tweet, which he was, I think he was trolling maybe a little bit, but he also meant it partially. Where, remember we said it back at the beginning, the worst thing that he said could happen to him is if his kids told him he's a vegetarian. Well, he recently announced something on TikTok and other platforms where he was starting to add more vegan-friendly dishes to the menu. So here's the man who has stood for, anti-vegetarians, anti-vegans. The very kind of chef I was many, many years ago is now saying, you know what, I heard everybody. I'm going to make some changes. Okay. Another one, Jamie. I mean, Jamie's, I think if Jamie Oliver's doing it, it's already kind of trended, right? He's probably one of the safest food product guys out there in terms of like his personal persona. He's got a meat-free meals show that's doing really well. He's got a new book out. So again, another sort of mainstream chef that's adopting more of this approach. And these guys, they're business guys. They're doing this because they know it's where the market's going. They're not doing it because they want to be thought leaders. Trust. I mean, again, I also have met Jamie Oliver a few times. He's a product, and if he's doing it, it's because there's the business guys behind him telling him, "Hey, Jamie, it's time to do this now." All right. So it is more than mainstream, and I think it is about celebrating flavor. Again, Otto Negli, another great Otto Alenghi, another great example of a chef that's really embracing and has been for a long time flavor. I mean, his book here, which pretty much goes into onions and how amazing onions are. It's pretty cool. Again, a guy who's leading, more thought leadership around about eating vegetables and plant-based. I had the pleasure to meet. I told you one of my biggest. I was sort of in awe. I had a chance to meet the man himself there. It was a huge thrill for me, and I actually got to do an event with him as well, where we cooked a dish each. So he's truly a legend. But the point I'm making here is, chefs are influencers in their industry, and we have to lobby them and court them, and we have to support them. And again, I know there's at least one person here who owns a restaurant group who's at the back now, but maybe we just need to encourage more of this. Okay. So this is a thing I want to touch on for a minute. Sometimes what we see a plant-based menu, we see, here's my main menu and here's my plant-based menu, right? Oh, would you like the plant-based menu? I'll bring it to you, right? So, but why is it like that? It should be integrated. There's no difference. There should be seamless. There should be no difference between plant-based integration into the menu, than any other dish. I think the next stage is chefs and consumers considering the option as simply a viable option. So I actually consult for one group, which I won't mention the name, where they did that very thing. And I encouraged them to create a plant-based menu. And the next thing I knew, there it was, oh, did you do the plant-based menu? Yes, chef, here it is. And someone ran away and got it for me. I said, but it's not on the main menu, right? So my next agenda is to get onto the main menu. So I think that's also part of what needs to happen in the business, right? The other thing I wanted to talk about is everyone having a seat at the table. So why should vegetarians not be able to go to a steakhouse, or a vegan go to a steakhouse and hang out with their friends? All right. Apart from the fact that they may want to stab the chef for cooking steak, they should be able to all have a seat at the table. So if menus are framed in such a way where a vegetarian, a vegan, and a meat lover can all sit at the same table and all share a glass of wine and all choose from the same menu, I think we've made real progress. So, and I hope that on that vegetarian option, it's not just, oh, it's the mushroom risotto again, or whatever other sort of standard lazy staple that chefs tend to go towards. Okay. So some of the stuff we've been doing around, which I hope you check out as we do more of them. I'll give a little plug. We have a chili competition coming, chili cook-off coming up, okay, where it's all plant-based chili. Top chefs around the city all cooking their version of a zero chili. More tables at number zeros. We're going to open more of those up to the public soon. And we're doing a lot of this sort of stuff now, where we're collaborating with other chefs, creating 4 hands, 8 hands, 6 hands dinners, where everyone's throwing their ideas into a menu and creating these incredible experiences around the country. So I think we'll have done, I don't know, at least 20, 30 of these sorts of events by the end of the year. All right, and this is another one where, which is another, again, an example of the collaborations between, great chefs here working with local chefs and myself to create like really interesting experiences and, around what is a pretty cool announcement for the company. Okay, that's it for me. I don't know if I spoke for as long as I was supposed to, or less or more, but that's all I got to say for now. If you want to find out more, check it out. It was a pleasure talking to you guys. Hope to see you guys choosing to eat plant-based more often. Thanks very much.